on Diddy do it.
Right.
You've been saying for years that you feel you knew Diddy's character. So what makes you so absolutely sure that these kinds of allegations that we've seen against him are true?
Well, I'm surprised by the allegations, as surprised as everyone else is. Like, I didn't make the allegations. I didn't tell people to say these things. It comes out, I see it in the news like everyone else. But I did feel uncomfortable with it.
50 Cent has once again shown that he is not just a rapper, actor, or businessman. He is someone unafraid to speak when the world prefers silence. And this time his voice is rattling the very foundations of Hollywood, because he has come forward with claims that Malcolm Jamal-Warner's sudden death in Costa Rica was not what the headlines reported, but rather a carefully covered-up incident connected to secrets Warner was preparing to reveal. Secrets that reach deep into the entertainment industry and even brush against names as powerful and polarizing as Sean Diddy Combs. Warner's passing was framed as a simple drowning accident, but people close to him never believed that version of the story. And now, with 50 Cent openly insisting that evidence was hidden, files were destroyed, and entire conversations erased, a chilling new layer of suspicion has opened up. For those who grew up with him as Theo Huxtable on The Cosby Show, Warner represented hope, intelligence, and integrity. He was the kind of figure audiences could trust, someone who didn't sell out, someone who chose depth over fame. But in the final months of his life, Warner wasn't just reflecting on his journey. He was actively working on a memoir and a documentary that insiders say contained highly sensitive material about the darker side of Hollywood, including how young black talents were controlled, manipulated, silenced by gatekeepers who claimed to be mentors. Bill Cosby's name was at the top of Warner's list, but according to whispers from his inner circle, Diddy's name appeared more than once in Warner's private notes. Not because Warner was involved in any scandal, but because he had seen too much parties where control blurred the line with coercion. Acquaintances who confided in him about being trapped in scenarios they never consented to, and networks of powerful men who thrived on creating silence around victims. Warner had started hinting at this in his podcast, speaking in coded language about careers being held hostage, about how even Emmy-nominated actors had seen friends disappear after crossing the wrong people, and about how the industry had a way of closing in on those who dared to speak. And then, just as his words grew sharper, just as he prepared to unveil his story, Warner ended up face down in foreign waters, his body cremated before any independent investigator could intervene, his laptop missing, his podcast files distorted. This alone would be suspicious, but 50 Cent claims he personally had conversations with Warner where the actor admitted he was afraid, that he was being watched, and that people with long memories from the past were resurfacing in his life. According to 50, Warner even confessed that he was considering leaving the spotlight entirely, stepping away from public life by the end of the year to focus solely on fatherhood, a plan that now looks less like a career shift and more like a survival strategy that came too late. What makes 50 Cent's revelation explosive is that he has nothing to gain from attaching himself to Warner's tragedy. If anything, it puts a target on his own back. But he has built his entire career on speaking the truth others won't, on calling out corruption even when it costs him. In his words, Warner didn't die naturally. Warner was silenced, and the proof lies in tapes and files that powerful figures didn't want reaching the public eye. And that's where Diddy's shadow enters this story, because at the exact same time Warner's podcast began peeling back the glossy surface of Hollywood's darkness, federal prosecutors were unsealing motions in Diddy's trial, exposing a world of coercion, manipulation, and freak-off encounters, orchestrated under the guise of entertainment. It's almost too eerie to dismiss as coincidence. Warner hinting at exploitation, Diddy fighting to keep evidence sealed, and then Warner vanishing before he could speak further. One paralegal has already whispered that Warner's name was flagged in a metadata, a sweep tied to the Diddy investigation. though no one in the prosecution has commented publicly. Was Warner simply adjacent, or was he on the verge of being a witness, a man trusted by too many who could no longer remain quiet? 50 Cent believes it was the latter, and his voice has reignited a fire that Warner tried to light before it was extinguished. He reminds us that Warner's work wasn't just about acting or music. It was about resisting a system that wanted to own him. And in the end, that resistance may have been what cost him his life. For 50 Cent, speaking now isn't just about honoring Malcolm's memory, it's about refusing to let the machine win again, about ensuring the truth finds light before it's buried with another coffin. And as he warns his fans and followers, the story doesn't end with Warner. It's only the beginning, and if someone as beloved, careful, and respected as Malcolm Jamal-Warner could be erased, then no one who holds dangerous truths should feel safe. When 50 Cent spoke out after Malcolm Jamal-Warner's death, it wasn't just another celebrity giving their condolences. It was an alarm bell that forced people to reconsider the narrative being sold by headlines, because unlike most in Hollywood who survive by keeping their heads down, 50 Cent had built his legacy on blunt truth, calculated risk, and a refusal to play by the quiet rules of the industry. And now his insistence that Warner's death was neither random nor accidental has forced attention toward the invisible machinery that so many insiders whisper about but rarely name aloud. Warner's life had already begun to change months before he left for Costa Rica. Friends noticed him canceling appearances, refusing offers that he once would have considered, even showing up to casual gatherings with private security. And while many brushed it off as paranoia, 50 Cent claims a man trying to buy himself time in a world where time is a luxury denied to those who know too much. The overlap with Diddy's trial cannot be ignored either, because the prosecution has painted a picture of systematic control. Encounters staged like corporate productions, contracts scrubbed by lawyers, victims silenced through NDA and payoffs, and Warner, though not accused of participating, allegedly close enough to the periphery that he heard stories firsthand. Imagine being someone who built his reputation on decency, who fans trusted implicitly, suddenly staring into a world where manipulation masqueraded as mentorship, where promises of success were laced with coercion, and where saying no could mean the end of a career or worse. According to people 50 Cent has spoken with, Warner had a mental list of names he no longer trusted, some from television, some from music, some from production companies that operate in both. And he feared that even saying these names aloud could trigger backlash. What if that's exactly what happened? What if, as 50 Cent suggests, Warner had already begun to talk to the wrong people, perhaps journalists, perhaps friends with podcasts, perhaps even investigators, and his death was a calculated move to shut one more door before it opened? Because history shows us that Hollywood runs on silence, silence bought, silence manufactured, silence enforced, and the ones who break it are almost always punished. Think about how many have gone missing from the public eye after threatening to tell too much. How many careers ended abruptly. How many sudden overdoses, car crashes, drownings, and suicides neatly closed the chapters of people who were inconvenient. 50 Cent, never known for sugarcoating, has said directly that Warner's passing doesn't sit right, that files were wiped, that the story has gaps only explained by deliberate tampering, and that people high up are working overtime to paint it as tragedy instead of strategy. He points to the vanishing social media posts, like the stylist who put up a candle emoji and not unexpected, but still hurts, before deleting it, as signals that the insiders know more than they can say. He points to Warner's own final podcast uploads, distorted, edited, missing timestamps, as proof that someone went in after the fact. And then there's the broader atmosphere. Diddy's camp fighting desperately to reduce his sentence by claiming everything was consensual, while federal investigators insisted on the word coercion, while witnesses described violence, while a culture of control was being laid bare in court. It's not far-fetched to imagine Warner's knowledge intersecting with that web. Maybe he wasn't a victim, maybe he wasn't complicit, but maybe he was a witness. A man who listened, who remembered, who carried details in his journals and conversations that were never meant to escape the circle. For 50 Cent, speaking out is more than just defending Warner's legacy. It's calling out a system that feeds on the silence of men like Warner, using tragedy as camouflage, and moving forward as though nothing happened. He knows people will call him a conspiracy theorist, a troublemaker, a man chasing headlines, but what his critics miss is that 50 Cent has survived long enough in this cutthroat industry to recognize patterns, to see when dots are being connected behind the curtain, and to understand that, louder the cover story, the dirtier the truth underneath. He has already warned fans that Warner's death is a closed tab, that someone somewhere saw him as a liability, and that it is only the beginning of a much darker saga that stretches from sitcom sets to Grammy stages to after parties guarded by NDA. The reality is chilling. If Warner could be silenced, then no one is beyond reach, not even those like 50 Cent himself who thrive on confrontation. And perhaps that's exactly why he's speaking, because he knows staying quiet doesn't guarantee safety, it just guarantees complicity. As he frames it, Warner's death is not just a loss, it's a message, a warning coded into silence, and the real question now isn't whether he drowned in Costa Rica, but how many more will be taken before someone dares to break the cycle for good. The strangest thing about Malcolm Jamal-Warner's death isn't the official story, it's the aftermath. The silence that followed, the quiet reshuffling of narratives, and the eerie way those closest to him seemed to vanish from public conversation. And this is exactly what 50 Cent has been hammering on, because if Warner's demise was natural, if it was nothing more than tragic chance, why the sudden digital blackout? Why the deleted tributes? Why the tightened lips of people who were once never afraid to speak? In the days after his passing, Warner's inner circle went dark. His podcast files showed tampering. His friends refused interviews, and even the industry insiders who thrive on gossip tiptoed around the subject, as though even mentioning his name might draw unwanted attention. For 50 Cent, this isn't coincidence, this is choreography, the deliberate staging of silence to protect people at the top. The same kind of silence that has kept men like Diddy afloat for decades despite whispers, lawsuits, settlements, and now criminal charges. And if Warner's name really did appear in metadata connected to the federal investigation, as one paralegal quietly leaked, then the stakes are even higher. Because that would mean he wasn't just adjacent, he was evidence, a potential witness, a man who could have tipped the scale by confirming what so many fear is true. That Hollywood has long been held hostage by gatekeepers who operate less like executives and more like syndicate bosses, protecting one another at all costs, using money, contracts, and sometimes intimidation to maintain control. 50 Cent has warned repeatedly that Warner's end is part of a bigger pattern, and his words strike a chord because history backs them up. We've seen actors, musicians, and assistants vanish from the spotlight after daring to question powerful men. We've seen careers collapse overnight with no explanation. We've seen mysterious accidents sweep inconvenient figures off the board just as lawsuits were heating up. And each time, the machine finds a way to move forward as though nothing happened. The fact that Diddy's sentencing has been marketed as closure, a final chapter, a neat bow on a grotesque story, is in 50 Cent's view a tactic, because if people believe the monster has been caged, they stop asking who built the cage, who profited from it, who still has keys to unlock it. Warner's death, then, becomes more than personal tragedy. It becomes a message encoded into silence. Stay in line, keep your mouth shut, or risk the same fate. What makes 50 Cent's commentary so explosive is that he refuses to play along. He refuses to soften his language, calling Diddy depraved, calling the system rotten, warning fans not to accept surface-level answers when the underground is teeming with secrets. He has framed Warner as both a casualty and a warning, someone who may not have been guilty of anything except knowing too much. And in that sense, Warner represents the danger of being decent in an indecent business, the danger of listening too closely, the danger of remembering conversations that others would prefer forgotten. But 50 Cent goes further, hinting that Warner may not be the last, that others are already on the list, that silence has become currency, and that as Diddy's empire fractures, scapegoats will be chosen, evidence will disappear, and witnesses will be silenced before their stories reach microphones. He points to the eerie timing. Warner's podcast teasing deeper discussions of industry exploitation. In the same week, Diddy's lawyers scrambled to reduce his jail time, and suggests that convergence isn't random, it's strategic, because moments of legal pressure always increase the risk of someone breaking ranks, and when that risk becomes too great, the easiest solution is removal. Whether or not Warner intended to testify, whether or not he even realized how close he was to the fire, his proximity alone made him a liability, and in the logic of the machine, liabilities don't get second chances. 50 Cent's decision to air these suspicions publicly is, in many ways, an act of defiance, because he knows the cost of speaking against power. He knows the danger of pulling back the curtain, and yet he's doing it anyway, daring people to connect dots, daring fans to question why a beloved actor's final days don't align with the story being sold. And maybe that's the real battle ahead, not just exposing one man, not just watching Diddy's empire crumble, but finally confronting the infrastructure that allows men like him to rise, thrive, and survive in the first place. Warner's death is a test of whether Hollywood will continue to bury its secrets in shallow graves, or whether, as 50 Cent insists, the truth will be dragged into the light, no matter how many reputations it destroys. For now, the industry hopes we mourn and move on, but the storm isn't over, it's only gathering, and the question 50 Cent leaves hanging in the air is as heavy as it is haunting. If Malcolm Jamal-Warner could be silenced, who's next?